my name is Linn and this is the Darbin Orvar channel. Well, today I'm going to show how I make these gorgeous round boxes on the bandsaw. So let's get building. This video is brought to you by Laguna Tools, thriving on innovation. So first of all, I need some wood. So I went looking through my pile and picked out a couple of rough sawn pieces of maple and walnut. Then I went over to my bandsaw, gave it a nice coat of wax, and attached a very rough piece to my log cutting jig so I could get one side straight. Once the piece was in more manageable shape, I took it over to my DIY jointer and jointed one side. I also jointed a couple of other pieces to get everything ready. I started out resawing the wood into 1-inch slabs, using a 1/2-inch blade for the bandsaw. Now once I had a whole bunch of walnut and maple milled up, I looked it over, arranged it, and I decided I wanted them a touch smaller for the pattern. So I cut them all up on the table saw to 3/4 by 3/4 inch strips. Now that's better. Next, I took them in the shop and I started to arrange the pieces, making sure everything was straight, seeing which pieces I should connect together, which ones fit better, and then I started the process of glue up, much like doing a cutting board, gluing and clamping. Once the glue was dry, I did a fair amount of sanding. Then I measured out where my circles would be and how large I could make them with this wood. I also needed the wood to be in smaller pieces, so I marked out and cut it up on the bandsaw. Now when the pieces were smaller, I could run them all through the planer to make sure everything was nice and smooth on both sides. I also went in to glue up a couple of thin pieces of walnut for the tops and the bottoms. So let's give that time to dry. Now to cut these boxes up, I need to drill holes in the centers for each circle. I'm going to use my circle cutting jig for my bandsaw that I made in a previous video. So I adjust the jig to match the radius of the largest possible circle. Then I put the center of the circle on the dowel on the jig and turn it on and start spinning. To cut the rings, I've switched blades to a 1/4 inch bandsaw blade, so I can cut smaller and smaller circles. So then I just repeat a couple of times. Then I adjust the jig for the next circle. I decided I wanted the circles here to be about a 1/2 inch thick, which is about 12 millimeters, so taking that into account. And then there's just a whole lot of cutting. Then adjusting the jig again for the next cut, and the rings keep getting smaller and smaller. In total, I cut up about 60 circles and rings, if not more. Once I had most of my rings cut, I needed to prepare for the bottoms and the tops. So here we have one of the pieces of walnut, and I'm marking out what sizes I need. I'm debating about how to attach the lids here. Here's one idea, using a pivot point and a magnet. So drilling holes in the pieces for the lids and the bottoms, and then cutting up those circles as well on the bandsaw. And of course I have more box rings to cut up as well, so I keep cutting. And just looking over my pieces. Next, it's time to do some glue up. First, I need to glue the cut in each ring to make it complete, just clamping each one together. And once the rings were fixed, I started gluing boxes together, starting with a bottom, then a ring, another ring, and so on, creating a pattern I was happy with. Then I put on the lid without glue for stability and clamped the box together. And then I moved on to gluing up a whole lot more. To fix the holes in the bottoms that I used as a pivot point, I made my own wood filler using yellow glue and the sawdust from the cuts, so it would match perfectly. And just kept on gluing. The next day when everything was dry, it was time to sand. So I took off a fair amount on the belt sander. Now to sand the insides of the boxes, I had first glued together the solid centerpieces once the rings were cut, and I made my own spindle sander using a drill and a threaded rod. Now this worked great, and I was so happy I did this because it made it so much easier to sand the insides than doing it by hand. Next I added a roundover on the bottoms using my router table, and I think this added a really nice touch. I decided to make some small knobs for the lids on the lathe, so here I'm using a piece of walnut. And here you can kind of see what this will look like. Next, to make sure the lids fit well on each box, I had cut out a smaller circle that fit just inside each box. So I glued each piece to each lid and clamped. I also glued on the tiny knobs for the lids. When everything was dry and sanded, I started finishing the boxes. First I went with 2 coats of wipe-on poly, and then I finished with some tung oil wax polish that I buffed out to get a really nice and smooth finish. And they are all finished! I just really love the way they came out, and the fact that you can get so many boxes out of one piece of material. I think that is really cool, and the fact that there's so little waste. So I think these are going to make great Christmas presents. But yeah, don't forget to subscribe if this is your first time here, because I put out project videos every week. Otherwise, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.